Welcome to the Love Local Chicagoland Podcast. Here we invite people from our local communities to share their stories and their voices. Through amplifying their message, we share their genuine human experiences that connect us all. Our goal is to make our communities more than just a place to live, but instead, a place to thrive. Tune in to hear what makes our communities so special right here on the Love Local Chicagoland Podcast.
The Love Local Chicagoland Podcast is made possible with the generous support of our community partners. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on, friends? Welcome back to another episode of the Love Local Chicagoland Podcast. Today, my friends, I am here with a good friend. Her name is Mary Licciardi. She is a specialist when it comes to yoga and grief, my friends. Grief sucks. It hurts, and it comes at us in so many different ways. This show and the show that you're going to see after this, following up next week, is going to be talking about grief. And it's going to be talking about learning about what grief is, but also, especially in today's episodes, how we could heal from grief, how we can own it, how we can lead with love to ourselves, grace to ourselves, so that we can work through it. Grief sucks. And it doesn't just come from a loss of a family member or a friend. It could come in loss of anything. And it's a pretty powerful emotion. In my experience, it's the most hidden and the most potent emotion that could affect and impact our lives, sometimes in a negative way. And you might hear some of that from me today when I've experienced grief and I've struggled with it. Now I feel like I have a good understanding of it, and I surround myself with people that can help me get through it. My friends, love and grace is important. And this conversation around grief and around yoga and around taking care of our bodies and our minds today has me truly grateful for us to be on this Love Local journey. And I'm really grateful to introduce you to a good friend, Mary Licciardi of Soul Purpose Yoga. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited. We met a couple years ago, right?
We did, yeah.
2 or 3 years ago. It was during this COVID time frame. And I remember meeting you for the first time, and I think fellow kind of like empath, where you started talking about grief and small talk right away. Introverts, empaths, we don't really like small talk, I think is the best way to be able to say, let's solve the world's problems. So I remember looking back and being like, I can't wait to interview her one day as I look to the future, because I think when it comes to grief and when it comes to being able to, help us live a happy lives, it's really understanding that the body keeps the score and that grief is hard. But when we understand it, when we allow ourselves love for ourselves and grace for ourselves, that we could work through this, especially when we, get involved with a good community of people, like yourself at Soul Purpose Yoga. But let me start this conversation with just tell people a little bit about yourself.
I feel like that's kind of a complicated question to answer, but I am somebody who has perceived life from a very, very young age as a journey, and a journey of compassion, a journey of forgiveness, a journey of love. And so everything I've done in my life, I've tried to do with intention, right? And the earlier part of my life, I was a hairstylist for 25 years, and every single day of my life in that field, I always set the intention of what can I do for people? Because it's not just about hair, it's about people, right? And then life occurrences, lots of grief and lots of trauma in my life kind of started shifting me away from fulfilling that purpose and going into another purpose, which is where I feel yoga came into the picture and calling me into that. So I am somebody who wears her heart on her sleeve, has a big old heart. I tell people all the time I have pockets, and everybody gets to be in a pocket of my heart, and they never go away. Even if they leave my life, they never go away. They will always be with me. So I'm just, trying to be as human as I can.
Yeah, it's important. The human experience isn't always easy, but last I heard, that's the only way to be able to go if you're a human, is to live out this human experience. And really understanding our bodies and our minds, I think, is really important, because life is hard, and it's, to me, there's waves of life, and sometimes those waves are small, and sometimes those waves are big and heavy. So being able to understand your body and your mind could really help us. To me, I think, even in the shit, experience joy.
Yep.
So I would love for our audience to know, like, you're an entrepreneur is what I hear you saying.
Yes.
So you're a hairstylist for 25 years as an
25 years,
entrepreneur.
and 17 years of that I owned my salon.
Beautiful. Can you explain to people like what that journey looked like to getting into like the yoga side of it? How did that all come into play?
My gosh, I mean, it is truly by the grace of God. So I really went into here to just try to help people. There was just something, once I didn't want to do it, I kind of started doing it. And once I immersed myself in it, I was like, oh my gosh, this chair is such a powerful tool to get to know people. You know, I read a lot of books and I love to study a lot of things. And every day I take various courses, but learning from people to me is the best education.
Yes.
So I just had this really awesome experience of getting to know people and seen them very, very human and trusting in me. Right. And it was a couple of years before, I think it was literally 2020. And a couple of weeks before the shutdown, I was renegotiating my lease with my salon. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm being pulled in a very different direction. I had already gone through my yoga teacher training. And I said, I think God is opening this door for me to help other people differently than just as a hairstylist, right? I had gone through some health stuff and couldn't keep doing hair anymore. And so I transitioned from that to then having yoga classes at my shop on a day that we were closed, and having sound meditations. A friend of mine does gong meditations, and he would come in and he would do that for us on like a Sunday night, open to the community, whoever wanted to come in. And that was just basically all of a sudden I shifted my focus from, okay, I'm kind of ready to relinquish the shop. I kept it until 2022. And then that was my time to move into fully immersing myself and taking a huge risk on all levels, heart risk, financial risk, every risk you can think of, to just try to reach people who are suffering. Because in the 25 years that I did hair, I experienced people's joys and I experienced their deep, profound heartbreak.
Yeah, you're like, I have a really good friend in Las Vegas, one of my wife's best friends, Kristen. She's a hairstylist, and she does Reiki now too.
I do Reiki too.
Reiki, I said it wrong.
No, you said it. You're good.
Did I say it? But I know I've done that too, and that's, to me, like anything I do to understand my emotions, because if I can understand my emotions and what they are, and I could breathe through those, I have found life to be life-changing. Because if we don't breathe, if we're just run and gun and we're here or there, we're not dealing with those things, it comes out in different ways. And, you know, there's a book that we talked about this, that the body does keep the score. And that is a very much a fact, and it goes somewhere in our bodies. So to be able to work through those things, to be able to let those things release from our emotions, and it might not happen overnight, my friends, right? It's a process, but we really could live joyfully even when things are really, really hard, because we're allowing ourselves to process those emotions. Would you agree on that?
100%.
So, but I hear you, and you're a hairstylist. You're very much a therapist from what you're doing. You're listening to people's stories, and you're hearing the good, the bad, the ugly, because you've built a relationship with those people that trust you over those years. And like, what really, obviously sounds like there's some health issues, but like what did you feel like took you to the stage of like, I think yoga is the next part of my journey, and working through grief is a big part of that in this yoga business that I'm going to be able to build? Well,
it kind of started when I went through a really tumultuous and horribly traumatic divorce in 2017. As I was going through my yoga teacher training, I always knew the power of moving the body and expressing, for me, emotion and trauma that way. I grew up a classically trained dancer and all of that. And I just kind of started seeing this shift happening with people in my chair who were experiencing different levels of grief at the same time that I was also going through it, right? And my clients were going through that with me. They knew a lot about my life. I had a very family-run business. And so it was probably really around the 2020 mark when I already said I was getting ready to transition. But what really was like the catalyst for that more was clients were calling me like crazy during 2020 to the point where like 168 texts an hour and my phone would just shut down for hours. I had no control of it, right? And they were calling and asking how I was doing. They were worried the salon was closed, we're in COVID and everybody's kind of dealing with their own stuff. But when they were asking me how I was doing, it really started to unfold about what they were experiencing and what they were going through. And I thought, I can't be one-on-one with people right now. I can't give them a space to go to. But when the weather's nice, why not do some pop-up yoga? I mean, I'm a yoga teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. And I started realizing how many people were grieving so many different things at that time. And what they really needed was the outlet and the tool to be able to do it. And so that was like, I have a couple years left on my lease, 2022. What am I going to do? I need to help people move through the process of being human. Then as time unfolded, it's a lot. It is a lot. And, when you become a yoga instructor, more often than not everybody's, there for the same reason, but more often than not, you've had the experience of whatever you've gone through in your life, and you know how yoga can heal the body, meditation, moving the body. And so you really do it so you can help people. If it's not about the ego, and there are those where that happens, every part of life that happens, but for the most part, that's why we do what we do. It's really to allow people to express themselves on their mat at that time. And so during 2020, I was specifically working with 3 people who never knew each other. And each one of them had a family member that committed suicide.
Wow.
Right? And, life distractions. When people are grieving, if they have to go back to work or things happen, they have a family to raise or whatever their grief is and whatever gets them through, life distractions come. Mm-hmm. But there's always those moments where the distraction is off and your mind and your heart go back to that suffering. And during 2020, when people couldn't have as much of the distraction, and we saw sometimes the worst of humanity, no food at the grocery store, people stealing from each other to get by. The grief I was just seeing it go through the roof. And that's when I knew this is my calling, because it keeps coming to me. I'm not seeking it. These people are coming to me.
And you listen. That's pretty beautiful. And it, from talking with you, you've experienced a lot of grief in your life.
Every year of my life.
And I want to kind of touch base on that here in a minute. But I think for our audience, talk about grief. We know it's a heavy emotion that comes in different stages. And to me, it comes blindly. And sometimes if you're not familiar with it and you can hide it in other areas. I know for me, when I had grief in the 2010s after my grandpa passed, which was very much a father figure to me, I drank my sorrows away, it was Jack Daniels and Pabst, like, just to be real. And I didn't understand grief. And I was, you're taught to fight through it. You're taught to go through it, especially from, we've learned more this generation, but I think previous generations, that was kind of, rub some dirt on this, you go, and you're tough. You just push through. And I think we now have learned that the body does keep the score, and that comes out in ways. For me, it came out in not being my best self, because I was drinking myself, so I didn't feel that anymore. And that's not necessarily the healthiest thing to be able to do. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would say it's the opposite. And I got really lucky to get good friends around me and a great wife to kind of help bring me back around. But if you numb them and you get into that habit, grief could become a very detrimental thing that could even take your life, in my experience, 100%. Because you're trying to be able to hide it. Yeah. So tell people walk us through the stages of grief and kind of what grief is from your point of view. And then I would just love to dive into a little bit of your story and what you've experienced with grief to share with our audience.
What grief is from my point of view? It's a good question. Grief, from my point of view, is an aching that continues to ache and continues to ache and continues to ache and never goes away. Mm-hmm. And it could be a song that, evokes an emotion. It can be a smell. It can be simply walking outside and a flashback, a memory, something.
Mhm.
But that is what grief is to me. Grief is just this unresolved aching,
Yeah.
right?
They could show up in different ways.
It shows
right?
up in so many ways for so many people.
Yeah, and there's different, from my understanding of it, I've learned more and more about it from my first experience, but then also going through grief after my grandma passed, which was in 2021. And you see, obviously I'm grieving, but I'm also if 3 aunts, 3 uncles, she had a lot of kids, and seeing them grieve, but not understand it. And to try to take that, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to tough through it. And then you saw them.
Yep. If families can completely explode.
They don't like that I say this, but we're not the same. And because of grief, but if we understood grief and we understood that there's different stages of it, I think what are the stages? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Which is something you work for.
Right.
And towards, if you understand those things and you're self-aware enough to know that, oh man, this is denial. Or for me, a big part of my grief was just trying to control everything with the family, with not understanding that I cannot manage anybody else's grief. All I could do is offer love and grace and allow them to work through their process. But being able to understand grief and to be able to work through it once you understand it is just a lot easier. But it comes from grace for yourself, because we're built, and many of us are built to not work through those emotions, but to hold on to them. Right. When we hold on to them, we are not our best selves.
We are burdened is what we are.
We're definitely burdened. And then we're burdened to other people in different ways. It could come off in other ways. It could come off in our jobs. It could come off in our relationships. It could come off on self-inflicting things like myself of drinking Jack Daniels and Pabst for years at a heavy level because of grief and not understanding it. Grief sucks.
It does. It sucks.
But there are ways through it. And I think, to me, that's why I'm dove into grief with it, because once you learn that there's a solution and that it's not an easy road, but that there's processes to get through it, that we can heal and we can get through things. And we could also, through that healing process, what I have learned is now we see it in others. And if we allow them grace, and if we allow them love, and if we allow them to sit where they're at, we could heal together, and we could allow more people to come up and allow people to feel those emotions. Forget the society that says push through that. Those days are old. We are way too smart now in today's day and age with all this information to be able to not understand what grief is, because grief doesn't just come from loss of a family member. Grief comes from loss in general, which could come from many different in many different ways in your life. And when you hold on to it and you try to control it all, it's usually you're going to run into a brick wall, in my experience. So
totally.
Your story, you've gone through a lot of grief. And I think that's maybe one of the things I feel like God kind of puts people through the ringer, that he needs to do his work here on earth, so that they could see different perspectives, that they could see different sides, and so that they could work through their own grief and whatever they have work, so that now they can help others. I think that's the most beautiful part of the human experience. If you could take your struggle and you could work through it in whichever way that is, my advice is small communities of people that help you, and grace for yourself, that we could live this better life. But tell us some of your story. I know for grief for you, like we went back to kind of your childhood, but kind of walk us through your life of some of the different griefs that you've had to work through.
I will tell you that it wasn't really until I went to see a therapist, eons ago, because when I was in high school, I was 16, and one of my best friends at the time, she and I were on the phone the night before school started. It was a Sunday night, and Monday morning I went to school and she wasn't there. And, sometimes these things hit your gut. I've always been kind of intuitive. I was like, gosh, I wonder why she's not at school today. Like, that's so weird. We have something going on today after school. It was the after school activity or whatever. And she's not here. And she didn't tell me she wasn't going to be at school. I'm like, she probably got sick, whatever. No big deal.
How old are you at this time?
16. Actually, I take that back. It was a month before I turned 16. So I was a sophomore in high school, and I'm sitting in a classroom, and it's probably around, 11 o'clock. And a therapist, school counselor, came and knocked on the door and said, I need to see Mary and pull me out of class. And I looked at her and I go, what's going on? Is everything okay? And, I wasn't somebody who got in trouble a lot and whatever. And she was like, well, let's just go to the office and talk. And I said, no, is it my friend? And I'm going to respect her privacy and not say her name. I said, is it so-and-so? And she looked at me and she said, why would you say that? And I said, because she's always at school and she's not at school. And I just talked to her yesterday. So is she okay? And is she safe? And she said, I think we need to go to the office. We went to the office and she sat me down and she said, there's been a terrible tragedy. I said, okay. And she said, your friend's parents died.
Wow.
Last night or this morning. And I said, what? And she said, well, it's really bad because your friend's mother was murdered by her husband.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So my friend and her siblings woke up to finding their mother murdered and their dad took his life. Murder-suicide. It was on the news. This is not, something that's super private. And the school made a very big mistake that day because after they had told me that and I had to process it, the police officers that were on the case couldn't get in touch with the few relatives they had here. And so they brought them to the school. And the school threw me in a room with them.
Wow.
And
so you got to feel all of that.
And not only feel it, I mean, when I tell you I had been through a lot in my life, domestic abuse at home, police being called, I mean, you name it, I've lived it. But that moment, I just remember seeing my friend and her siblings and the words that they were screaming, I still hear. It has never left me. And then the school released me and they're like, okay, well, you could go back to class now.
So this is what, the 90s?
This is the 90s. Yes, yeah. I'm 47. It's the
Yeah.
90s. And I remember walking outside of that room. And apparently there was already news media that was outside of the school and I didn't know anything about it.
Oh my God.
And this guy that I went to school with came up to me and he goes, is it true? And I go, is what true? Like, I was in such a state of shock. You know that feeling where people are like, pinch me? That is literally what I felt like. I was like, I think somebody needs to tell me that I'm still alive and that what I've experienced is what actually, like the reality of what just happened. And he's like, are they dead? Like, did her mom get killed by her dad? And I was like, what? I mean, it was just a whirlwind, right? And so I went home after school. My mom and my stepdad sat down and talked to me, but they didn't give me the resources. They weren't like, this is probably really traumatic for you. They were dealing with trauma of their own. They were like, should we open our house to these kids? Like, where are they going to go? It was just this whole thing, right? Okay. So now flash forward. I went through that and I get the shock and all of these things and I've buried it. I never, ever, ever felt it. I buried it. I buried the shock of that room. I buried the loss of a friendship, right? And that's also how I was raised. You keep everything under. We don't say anything to anybody. That's part of the Italian culture a lot.
Yeah.
So now here we are, and it's 2000 and I want to say 2005. I could be wrong on that, but somewhere around that time frame. And it was earlier than that, 2003. And I was working at a salon at the time. And there was a wonderful client who I had. She was a single mother. She lived out of state, but would fly in. Her family was from here. She grew up here. Her mother was a client of mine for years and just a lovely, lovely family. And her mom came into the shop, called the shop, and then came into the shop and said, I have some terrible news. My daughter was brutally murdered.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her daughter was my client. And now all of a sudden, I am thrown into a world of anxiety that I never had experienced in my life. I'm like, what is happening to me? I went home that night. I couldn't sleep for 24 hours. I couldn't sleep for 48 hours. I could not sleep for 72 hours.
Wow.
And at that point I said, I think I need to go to a hospital. Like I literally can't sleep. And I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't function. Went to a hospital. They put me on sedatives, tried to get my blood pressure down. I mean, my heart rate was through the roof. And they said, maybe you need to follow up with your primary care doctor, who's a good friend of mine. I followed up with him and he said, I think you need to see a therapist. I don't know what's going on, but this is not like you and we need to get to the bottom of it. First appointment I had with the therapist, he looked at me and he said, I think that you are having post-traumatic stress disorder. And I go, what? He goes, PTSD. I go, okay. What? Yeah. I said, I've read a lot about stuff, but this one doesn't come up a lot. And he said, you're experiencing all the feelings you buried in the loss from high school into what's happened to your client and what her family is probably grieving. I was like, oh. And so that started this little therapy road of mine. They had put me on medication. The medication never worked. And I was like, it's just not helping anything. It's not. And that's when I started. Band-Aid it, it's right? A Band-Aid. Yeah. And that's when I started reading a book on meditation. I thought, this is something I have to start practicing because I understand what happens to the human body now. And so that was, I think I was 26 or something at that time. So that was my journey into deep meditation. I mean, sitting in a room and people could be talking and I hear nothing, I feel nothing, and I'm in another world. Everything's shut out and I'm just in. And it was beautiful and it was what I needed, right? So that was like the shocking part of death and losing people, because my friend's mother, I adored her. So, and over the years, my friendship with my former friend and I, it never continued. It was just too much probably of a connection that was difficult, right? So lost her mom, went through that, lost the friendship. Then I'm working in a salon and this woman's lost her daughter and her daughter's now left a child behind, and I'm feeling that. Gosh. And, I had lost people in other ways already.
We're all wired different, but from talking to you, like there's a certain amount of people in our world, a small percentage, who could feel the energy of things like that is through them. Even if it's somebody sitting across from you, you carry that with them.
Yep.
It's my experience. I think I have some of that in me too. I didn't learn about it until later in life, but it's definitely a real thing. And I can chisel it all the way back to being a kid. So you're carrying all this stuff and post-traumatic stress through this time frame. You're learning meditation is a part of this healing process.
Yep.
For you. Yep. Where did this meditation turn into yoga? And how did that come into be?
So it actually turned into Reiki first.
Okay.
I was having some medical issues that doctors couldn't figure out, trapped emotions in the body that couldn't be released. And so I started seeing a Reiki healer first to try to extract the inflammation and bring the emotions up to the surface. And then I thought, my whole life, I've only known that what always made me feel good, because I'm a high energy person, was movement in the body. And I had been practicing yoga for years anyway, because it was part of my dance curriculum back when I was dancing, right? And so I started with Reiki. From Reiki, I started taking my yoga teacher training. I'm like, 2 weeks into my yoga teacher training. I was married at the time. And I'm laughing because I'm hearing this in my head as I'm saying this to you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this absurdity of my life sometimes, that is a blessing and hard. But my ex-husband, prior to us getting divorced, started having PTSD. Okay. He was a law enforcement officer. Something happened on the job, probably an accumulation of things happened on the job. At the same time, he had just lost his mother and his dad was terminally ill. So he's going through PTSD and it wasn't kind, and he was not kind. Okay. And he was hurting. And I always pardoned and forgave because I said, I know what it's like to suffer as a human. I can't hold this against him, but I'm stuck in a situation where I cannot help him. And there's nothing I can do for this person. I have to accept them exactly as they are in this situation and continue to love them through it. Mm-hmm. And as I was going through my yoga teacher training, that's when the pieces of the surrender puzzle, the compassion puzzle, the peace puzzle, the moving through all of the turbulent emotions that you keep going through and saying, okay, how do I accept that this person is the way that they are, that they're never, ever going to change, and that my marriage probably is going to suffer big time, right?
For sure.
And all of those things happened. So that's where like the blessing of the yoga practice, the meditation, the movement, what the body experiences, what it releases, what it allows you to understand when you sit quiet, moving forward, gets you through that all of the emotions that are stirred up with grief.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going through that divorce, I can tell you that I thought I experienced grief. It was a completely different side of grief.
Yeah.
The loss was so different. And knowing somebody is committing self-harm, he started to abuse alcohol terribly. And then he had 2 beautiful children that were my stepchildren in the process. And seeing them suffer because he was suffering and being helpless is a grief beyond.
Mm-hmm.
When he was self-harming, there's guilt. Why can't I help him? Why can't I do more? Why is he doing this? Why doesn't he love his kids enough? Why doesn't he love me enough to snap out of this, right? All of those things go through your head.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the end, I have to say he's human and he's suffering. And it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with his kids. But it has everything to do with him. And the only person who can pull himself out of this is him.
Mm-hmm.
And he left. I mean, he literally, we went out to dinner one night. We got home. He goes, I can't do this. And he left.
Wow.
He tried coming back a few times, and I was open to receiving because I thought it was my way of showing love and acceptance.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And I mean this with love. It's that grief emotion. And I go back to, if we're not aware of it, or if we're not allowed to be able to let ourselves breathe through it and feel it, and we're just trying to run it, it does become, to me, it becomes very harmful to yourself. And I've seen it where it starts with yourself, but then it goes out to other people, and different types of abuse that could happen with experiences that I've seen in my life. And because grief is a really hard emotion, and it does impact our entire bodies. Grief is part of the human experience. There is no running from grief. You have to face it head on, which is my experience is maybe one of the hardest things we have to do as a human. Like there's nothing harder than actually working through that grief. It actually, I'm going to say it like, I mean, it fucking sucks.
It's work.
It's work. It's work.
So much
and
work.
You have to look in too. And I know, like, I can speak for myself and with this, and I'm guessing your ex-husband had this too. Like, you have to look into yourself. It's even harder. So alcohol or some other type of coping mechanism just becomes easier. And then at least you don't feel it. But then, like, what are you that next day? What are you that night once you're half bottle in? What are you when you're 6 beers in and that half bottle, and you just keep going? How are you impacted that next day? And it's that compound effect 100%. Where I've been in a place where I was running from that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he had a little bit of that in him too, where he's like, I'm going to get out of here because it's easier to run.
100%.
It's easier to run than to come in, deal with reality, and allow yourself the grace and love to process.
Yeah.
And for me, it's I've been able to get through that because small groups of people. My faith journey has helped be cautious with that. Not all faith is good, and I think we know that.
Right.
Or religion is good, I should say. So be careful with that and understand where people's true intentions are.
Right.
But it takes a lot of things to come together to be able to process those things. But you have to start with wanting to be able to help. Be able to put in that work and to be able to breathe through it, to be able to move your body through the things that you're talking about through it. For me, cold plunges helped, because if you're like, why are you so obsessed with cold plunges? 2 things. The dopamine hit that you get after you get out of the cold plunge is there, but it's the breathing. So now when I experience grief, or when I get punched in the face as a business owner, which then could sometimes turn into grief in a different way, and a loss of a dream, as me and you've talked about before, all of a sudden, like, I have a choice. I could face it and I could work with it, or I could hide it, and then that's going to turn out to the rest of my team. I'm super grateful that, and the reason why I'm so obsessed with this, I'm grateful for the people around me that allow me to like process that and work through that. But just, we're able to give me love, but not everybody can get there.
Nope.
And the reason why I'm doing this show is because I pray that you all allow yourself the love and grace to get there, because it is painful and it is hurt. And the things that you have to undig to get through sometimes what that grief is, or that post-traumatic stress piece is so painful.
It's so painful.
It's so important to have people that love you, that have grace for you, that some type of therapy. This is not a sign of weakness. And I think we both know that, but it's to our audience. This is a sign of strength, because you can work through grief. You can work through post-traumatic stress. It is probably going to be one of the hardest things you have to do in your entire life. But that's a part of this human experience. But once you do it, once you find good practices, there's ways to be able to counteract it. But there's no way around it.
There's no way around it.
You have to go through it. And it is, to me, it is stored in our body. Our world right now, there's got to be so much grief out there. I know
there is so much grief. I mean, I hear it all the time.
There's obviously the normal loss of family, loss of a relationship, whether that's a friend or whether that's something bigger. Of it's like you're talking about with divorce. There's many different ways that grief could show up. But I look at it now, and I'm just going to be blunt. We're kind of divided as a society right now. Personally, I think that this is all a part of a game that we're playing. Propaganda and misinformation has been here since the onset.
Yep.
Now it could be here on crack.
Yep.
But there's a lot of grief, and I know I could see it after the election this year. I saw it in many people, and I still do.
Oh, it was the hearts were heavy, and the air was heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was that, and I had someone that's very close to me, like, feel like they were going to throw up and those feelings once they found those things out. And it's a process and to be able to work through. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about like some best practices and some yoga sequencing that we'll do here in a little bit, but like during times like today, like what's your Mary Licciardi's soul purpose yoga, like words of wisdom to people that are going through grief that maybe they never thought they would experience this type of grief because of our political climate, our religious climate, all the stuff that's being kind of divided. There is grief in that. What's your words to wisdom to them?
I think once it comes to the surface, don't push it down. Realize what you can control in the situation and what you can't. And then come to a level of forgiving whatever it is you feel you've lost, the feelings that you're feeling because of that loss, and extend that grace to everybody else, right? Because what's happened, this division that's happened has stemmed from years of history in the making. You look at World War, you look at all of these things, and all of it stems, a lot of it starts with fear, right? And even now, this division is from fear.
Yes.
Fear from one side, seeing how they view the world and how it's affecting them and how they're scared and how they're going to vote and what they're going to do about their particular fear. And it's the same on the other side. Mm-hmm. So now we have a battle.
Different fears.
Yes. Correct. Mm-hmm. Different fears, right? And nobody's saying, shit, I'm scared. And if I'm scared, they might be scared on the other side. Yes. Instead, what's happened is this fear pushes up into anger. Mm-hmm. And part of that anger is resistance for not, just my opinion, resistance for not wanting to face what the fear is and what they are feeling to begin with.
Drop that mic. Not that one, but a mic. That's beautiful. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So now we're at this place where it's like all this stuff is surfacing and, I don't know, why do they get to be scared? Why don't I get to be scared? Whatever it is. And it's bubbling and it's bubbling. It's like, oh, now I'm pissed. And now my adrenaline is going. And now my cortisol levels are through the roof. And now my brain can't function because it's in constant fight or flight, fight or flight. Let me turn on the news. Let me read the paper. Let me hear what's happening. Let me hear what everybody else has to say. And that negativity perpetuates that negativity. And all of a sudden we're stuck at this place where we are so gosh darn angry. And we implode. Yep. And we put that on other people. You get in a car and somebody's somebody just has to get somewhere,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
so much quicker than you. And they make these mistakes and they don't have regard for human life because they're driving unsafely. And where does it come from? There's a reason, right? So now all that stuff comes to the surface. We have to lean into that and we have to go inward. Every time I teach yoga, my classes start with we go inward first. I comb you through the body and you breathe into certain parts of the body. And that allows you to there's something that happens when we're in fight or flight mode, which is what most of us are walking around in now.
Psoas tights up. Yeah, keep going. You know what it is.
Okay, but the major thing is sympathetic nervous system. Okay, our body's like, yeah, I got to get through this. Adrenaline's going, cortisol's in the bloodstream. It goes to the amygdala. The amygdala's processing the emotions, and you're sitting in it. And if you don't calm it and engage the parasympathetic nervous system, we are in trouble.
Yes. When
your body goes through grief, they say most people on average, it takes 6 months of cortisol before cortisol levels start to calm.
Wow.
Now, if you are somebody in a perpetual state of unhappiness and grief and all of those things, it's not coming down in 6 months. You may have moments, but it's not coming down in 6 months. This is years and years and years of accumulation.
Constant work and
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Constant work. You're talking about that, and I'm faith driven now. I've learned a lot. I've had really good mentors.
Tool.
It's a wonderful tool when
Certainly
used correctly.
When used correctly, absolutely.
When used with love and grace, and for me, it's the principles of Jesus.
That's it. Practicing what it preaches.
And there's other religions out there. To me, I think it's an operating system at the end of the day for us humans. And I think there's other operating systems out there that could work for other people and other religions. And I think at the end of it is, does it work for you? And does it help? Yep. Christianity has helped me growing. I've always been a Christian. I was baptized, but I didn't always practice it. I didn't always have it at the forefront. I would say it's like the 2010s, really 2012, 2013, when I had good friends come into play that really helped me show the power of the principles of Jesus. And it starts at home. But I had loss in my early 20s, and I had, it was a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment, a lot of sadness. You look at me now and you're like, oh, this guy, he's soft. He's talking about love. He's talking about peace, love, and happiness. Love your neighbor. I'm not a nice person when fear and grief is there. And you could ask my friends that still aren't.
That's most of us.
And you did not want to come in my way.
Yep.
And I used that fear and I used that anger that was in me, and I hurt people. If you came at me and if you tested me, you were going to fucking lose. Holy shit. As I sit here now, this is probably 20 years later, as I struggle every single day, but I do feel I'm healed. And I feel like there's a part of me that will always continue to heal. I think that's a part of it. That is part of the human experience. But now I give that grace. Yep. But I look back at that guy, and like, if I had social media and I had to go against different people now, like, I would be, let's go. And it wouldn't be good. And I see this now as a fellow empath. I see it and feel it in the community now, and sometimes directly at me. And I sit back and I share and I show and reflect on my life experiences. And then I understand, like, when grief popped up when I didn't even know it. Yep. But it comes from fear. It comes from anger. It comes from not understanding. It comes from not wanting to understand another person's side and to show them love and grace. Yep. But then it could come out in many ways. For me, I had this one phase of my life, which I would say it was alcohol then too, but it was this rage that it was almost, I was looking for it at times because it felt good to get that out of there. Yeah. Like it was something. It was movement. Yeah. It was movement. That poor guy that got in my way. It was movement. My friends call him Jason 2003. There's talks about that. There's still like a text thread with us, and they go back to that. Now they call me Ned from The Simpsons now, like as a joke, as friends. But we go back to that time. But if I go back to that time, I was working through so much that I needed to be able to process, to be able to go through. And instead of being able to process, and instead of understanding that coming from grace from within myself and love for myself so that I could portray grace and love to others was not there.
Yeah.
So that anger, that fighting thing was just like, come on, man, like, give me somebody. Like,
Yep.
It gave me that outlet to do that. It was a movement. My friends, I do not recommend that. And especially in times like today. In fact, I am scared of what we will do to our society if we get to that point.
Yeah.
So hence why we're doing this. Hence why we're doing a lot of our shows, is because we think we need to heal as a society, and we could heal through our stories and through understanding that love and grace with ourselves.
I was going to say that forgiveness and that love and
Forgiveness
grace
is a piece of it. Yes, 100%. That's in there.
has to
I haven't
be
said
with-
it, but yes.
but it has to be with yourself first.
Yes, starts at home.
And it's the hardest thing for us to do is to forgive ourselves. We think it's hard to forgive others, but really
Yes.
it's hard for us to forgive ourselves, because that means we have to get real with ourselves and say, this wasn't all right. This was not okay. Maybe things were out of my control and I behaved a certain way, whatever it was. It's not always a behavior. So, but unless you can forgive yourself,
Mhm.
you are not going to be able. If you can't give yourself that love and grace for yourself, it's hard to give it to other
That's
people.
it. So understanding shame to
Oh,
me is important, because I look at that time, or I look at the time and grieving through my grandfather, and later in life afterwards, even with my grandma. Grief is very, very hard. It's not always it doesn't always come in healthy ways, but in many times, because of societal norms, when we look in that mirror,
Yeah.
you want to cry.
Yeah.
And you could be the toughest fucking guy in the room.
Yeah.
And you toughen up and you push through that. But that realness that is there is real. And the shame that you have for many, everybody's different, but there's shame, to me, holds us down, because we can't forgive ourselves, because we can't forgive others, because there's something there that we need to work at within ourselves that is stopping us to go there. It's really, really hard. So I can't go back to like love, grace. I'm so glad you mentioned forgiveness, because that's the foundation of that, all of that. And then to me, it's leading with love, forgiveness for yourself through that love, and then offering grace to yourself and to others, and understand that as humans, this is the human experience. It's hard. That's why having an operating system that could allow you to process things and have good rhythms to be able to process things and to be able to work through them. For me, exercise is a big part of my health journey, for both physically and mentally. I need that in my life.
It goes hand in hand.
We need to get there, right? So like, if you're struggling out there now, like, allow yourself that love, grace, allow yourself that forgiveness. Understand that no matter what you did, that you're forgiven, and that you could get through it if you could forgive yourself.
Jason,
first.
I was in Asheville, North Carolina last year. I think, I went there for a little extended period of time.
I remember thinking like, I can't wait to interview her on a podcast after that too.
And I will tell you, if you want to talk about grief, because of what's happened there,
Mhm.
I have been in a profound state of grief. I can't, I planned on being there now. I can't get back there. I've talked with my friends there, and what's happening there there's a lot of love there. I swear that city was built on a vortex of love. It is in the soil, and they are loving people, but there's just a lot of heartbreak, right?
Yes.
But it is a place where, how do I explain this? Like almost every single house has a sign in front of it that says love. And that could be done with, iron, that could be done with clay, that could be, but it's everywhere you go. And there's always these little things, like you're walking down the sidewalk. So by the river, which is now, one of the worst parts of Asheville, where it flooded. And there was this artist, I don't know who he was and whatever, but he would just go and he would put these sayings on little spots along the river sidewalk. And one of the sayings was, forgive yourself. You did the best with who you were at the time. I may be paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure that's okay. Verbatim, maybe a little off. But I remember walking my dog and seeing that on the sidewalk. And it was like somebody just came and put their heart on mine, like, and stopped me. It was like, take a minute and read that. Because while you are here experiencing independence in a loving community, thinking about coming back home and going and starting your grief yoga program back home. I'm fortunate that I was the person that got to see it when there are so many people who are living in places and experiencing life who haven't gotten there yet, right? But that is really what it is. We are doing the best at the time with what we can.
Yeah.
I hate to say
That's
it,
why grace is so important.
but your anger, your wanting to fight, as terrible as it sounds, because we don't condone violence. Fighting's not the answer.
Absolutely not.
But it was the best you could do it with yourself at that time.
It was the only way I had out to be able to just not feel it for a minute.
Exactly.
Because that energy was pushed, that cortisol was pushed towards another human being.
That's so powerful, isn't it?
It was pushed towards another human being. Yeah. And because of that urge, that fight, it wasn't healthy at all. And not only was it fighting, but it turned into alcohol. It was a time of drugs. I thank God for my wife to come into my life when she should have, because I don't think I would have made it in Las Vegas very long if I didn't have somebody that came to me and showed me love, showed me grace, saw me do things that she would never condone, but forgave me.
Yeah.
And because she kept loving me through that time frame, even when I was making mistakes, we were like, I started to slowly heal. And it was not too, this is a long process. I'm still healing today.
It's lifelong.
It is not a quick fix, but I will tell you what, I will take that not quick fix any day of the week, other than doing these unhealthy things from the basis of grief and from fear and from anger. I'll take that pain. I'll take whatever I have to work through now, but coming from a place of forgiveness, coming from a place of love and grace for oneself, and then offer that to other people.
Yeah.
When we could do that, to me, I think we could start healing as a society. And to me, that's what I think we need now. We need to talk to each other as a society members that are different than us, and seek to understand and to listen, but without the intent to show that you are right, but to understand a person's point of view.
Yeah.
But offer them love and grace, because their human experiences got them to here. But by shutting them down, by doing the things and not understanding where they're coming from, that's not okay either.
No.
So talking to each other, coming to a table, whether it is this table or another table, to be able to work out differences, and to be able to also be okay with not everybody's going to be like us, and that's okay. But to your point, we can't control that.
Nope.
But stop that there. But you could still have a conversation as somebody is different than you. And in fact, I think it's recommended, because there are so many different perspectives in this world, from growing up as a poor kid in Indiana to going to a very wealthy school in Las Vegas. The greatest gift I ever have is I understand that there is two sides to every table. So seeing people in poverty growing up to going to be what would be a Conant or a friend in Las Vegas, and being that insecure kid that had to bottle things up to prove himself is a lot to be able to work through. Operating system, love, grace, forgiveness, but to me, it's about practices and that can help us get there, that can be with you for lifelong journey. And so when I think of overcoming grief, when I think of overcoming the fear and the anger that comes with it, there's a handful of ways to be able to do it, from prayer to small groups of people that could uplift you, but movement is a big piece of it. And for me, I know I found cycling to be that. I found cold plunges to be those rhythms where I'm like, I could work through a cold plunge. Anything could come at me, because I'm sitting in 40-degree water or colder in certain times, and I have to breathe through that. What is that breathing allowing me to do?
Yeah.
It's allowing me to work through those other emotions that I have, so that I could really feel this human experience. And then as long as I have this piece of forgiveness, love, and grace for myself, that I could work through it to others too. But I have found that it truly, truly starts at home. You're a yoga teacher, and you have meditation as well, and it's based around grief, and it's really, to me, it's helping people heal. Why is movement so important? Whether it's yoga from your experiences or other types of movement, why is movement so important to make sure that we could heal through this grieving process?
Because we are all conduits of energy. And what happens is, when we have the ick, the hardship, the emotions, we store those and we trap them in the body. And if we do not move that energy, stays stagnant
Mm-hmm.
and creates disease, contributes to disease. So in order to combat,
Eats away, literally your soul, but other parts of your body too, right?
Jason, I mean, I've gone through so much grief in my life. And after my divorce, 2020 comes, I'm dealing with the business, my grandparents, they had a beautiful love affair. They were married forever. They never spent a day apart. My grandfather went into the hospital first with COVID. My grandmother went in after him. My grandmother was already experiencing Alzheimer's and on a decline. My grandfather was on a decline only. That started because he was brokenhearted over my grandmother's sickness and seeing her morph into somebody who didn't remember him. It was a heartbreak. They went into the hospital. My grandfather went first. My grandmother followed. They were a floor apart from each other. They had spent 70 years of their lives together, right? They're a floor apart from each other. Never knew that one or the other was in the hospital. My grandmother died first after 4 days. My grandfather still thought my grandmother was alive and holding on to go home, and died 9 days after that.
Wow.
Okay. So during that time, I started having these horrible physical ailments in my body, that pain I was always walking barefoot. I used to, run 3 or 4 days a week, walk every day, sometimes anywhere from 5 to 10 miles a day. I practiced yoga 5 to 7 days a week, 2 hours at a time, plus teaching and doing hair, 17 hours a day. And my body was giving me all of these clues that I had still been carrying the grief of the divorce. Took a while to be finalized. We had nothing, we shared nothing, but his mental health prohibited a normal divorce proceeding.
Sure.
Okay. So at the end of 2019, my divorce was final. The people in my life knew how horrific things were then. 2020 comes. Now my grandparents are dying, and I'm thinking it's just the stress of seeing my family having to adjust to a tragic loss. Yes, they were older. Yes, inevitably they were going to go before everybody. But the way things happened and not being able to be around them and knowing their love story, it just broke a lot of people's hearts. It was horrible. It really was horrible. So this whole time I'm thinking, okay, my body is just fighting me and in pain because I am just stressed, right? And so I had this horrific pain in my hips. I would walk and I would feel every day like I was stepping on broken glass repeatedly. I was waking up with a patch of hives on my lower back and a patch of hives over my right hip and not knowing why. I started removing foods. I'm like, maybe I'm having more food allergies again. Maybe, la, la, la. And then one day I got home from work and I literally collapsed. My left leg went completely numb. I thought I was having a stroke. Broke my coffee table. Just horrible mess of things. And 6 months later, they found 20 tumors on my right hip bone. I have those removed. 6 months later, they recurred. Last year, I had another 22 removed, and I still have some that are stuck in tissue that they just can't get out. Now, by the grace of God, they are not sarcoma. They always have to watch, especially now these are tumors are in tissue. Tissue can change. Could that bring on a sarcoma?
Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? But I really believe that the only way I got through the pain, and I believe that all of these tumors came on because of trauma. We store trauma in our hips. That is medically proven. We store trauma in our hips. And I had
working through now.
years of trauma. Okay.
Yep.
So, and that now we have it. And it wasn't enough the first time. The second lesson had to come back and say, you need to adjust your life again because they're back. And how are you going to get through this? So, by the grace of God, I go through my meditation practices. I was still moving the body. And that allowed, if there was going to be any more building up of disease or any more building up of it allowed it to not process into that, what could have been worse, right? And I do believe it was breathing, literally breathing into the pain and movement of the body, even if it was just a little bit, so that my conduit of energy that I am, that you are, that we all are, wasn't staying stuck in this stagnant place where it could allow more disease to fester and grow. I am a walking miracle. I want to make that clear. The recovery, and everything wasn't supposed to happen the way that it did. And I saw my doctor last fall, and she said, your results are not typical for what you have been through. We did not think that there would be this recovery. We did not foresee, we could, in the medical field, you have gone against every single thing that we would have predicted.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, she said, some of that is you came in here with the right attitude. You came in here with a positive attitude, and you kept treating your body through the process. That's why moving the body is important, because things get stuck, and the longer they get stuck, the more cells change. Mm-hmm. Immune system, histamine response from an immune system goes crazy. You're sick more often. The common cold. It's all because there's things here that need to be moved.
Yeah, totally. I'm going through, I feel like I'm in the later stages of it now. I've always not been good in my hip area, my hamstrings and all that. So learning what type of motions are in the hamstrings, and then now working through the hip stuff, which is a consistent rhythm of yoga, which I'll do twice a week now. I would love to fit in more, but
twice a week is amazing. I tell people all the time, twice a week is great.
Because of good friends and we understand what's happening to our bodies, it was all right, we're going to cycle, but we're also going to, we're going to develop this rhythm into to being able to stretch, and especially understanding that trauma is stored in the body. So I've worked through a lot in the last year. I actually had to be off the bike all this season, besides a couple really short rides, because of what happened to my lower back. If you look at what happened to my lower back, it was a stem of the things that I needed to work out through my hips and through my hamstrings, which I look at all the traumas and everything that I went through, which people are like, trauma, you had a good life. I feel really blessed. My parents are super loving. They did the best that they can. And I am super grateful for them. And I'm grateful for every other one of my family members, but we all experience trauma.
Yeah.
Them included.
Say things like that. I think to myself, do you really understand what you're saying to somebody when you say, you've had a good life, or you grew up with loving parents? You have no idea.
We all experience trauma.
Been through.
We all experience 100%. Trauma. It doesn't mean that there wasn't some love in there or whatever, or good intent. Yeah. It just, like you said, people are doing the best that they can at the moment, at the time that they're in. I think most of the human experience, I think most of us are just doing the best we can. I really do. Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to understand the full spectrum of what we are as humans, so that we could heal through that, so that we could live better while we're here on this earth. But we're trying to make this interactive, and I really want to make this show something that people leave with value for. I think good content and good conversations can uplift and heal a community. Yes, businesses are great to be able to interview. That's a part of who we do. But conversations like this, conversations that we're going to be having next week around grief as well. We're doing this because it's the holiday season, and grief usually comes punching you in your face around the holiday season right now. We really want to help people. Really, really do. Would you mind taking us outside and kind of walking us through maybe a practice to be able to kind of work through our grief process, like a place to start?
I would be happy to.
Cool. Well, let's go do that, and then we'll come back and finish the show. All right, my friends, so we're out here in front of our studio today here at Bellwork Chicagoland to do a little bit of a yoga sequence to help you get some movement in your life, and also just to focus it on the meditation piece. So our friend Mary, who we're talking to in here, is going to guide us through a short practice to help us work through our grief and get it out of our bodies so that we can be healthier. So Mary, do your thing.
We're actually beginning this practice by lubricating the hip joints and getting movement through the hips. So when you are tight, these are great things that you can do to get your hips a little softer, right? Okay, so you walk your feet out, hip width apart, come onto your back slowly, so you're drawing that belly into your spine. And then bring your arms out in a T with your palms down, and your hands will be just below your shoulders. These are called windshield wipers, but you're going to drop your knees to your left, and if you can, look over your right shoulder, and engage the lower abdomen to bring your knees up and drop them to the other side, looking over your left shoulder. Yep. And then come back up, And just do this a couple of times, right, at your own pace from left to right. And then this time, bring your knees over to your left. We're going to hold here. We're going to breathe into the right open side of our body. We often store grief in our digestive tract. This is breathing into the organs and allowing a softening there, if you will, and breathing life into them, releasing anything that's staying stuck there. And then bring your knees up again. Opposite side, drop your knees to your right. And again, just draw your awareness into that left open space of your body. Breathe into your organs. One more breath in and out. And then draw your knees up again and pause. Now bring your knees to your chest and we're going to rock ourselves up to seated position. Now we're going to come onto all fours for cat-cow. Your wrists will be under your shoulders, knees hip-width apart. Inhale, drop the belly, lift the chest, chin is the last thing to come up. Exhale, round the belly, round the spine, draw that belly in. And then again, inhale, dropping the belly, head is the last thing to come up. Exhale, draw that belly in, rounding the spine. One more. What's happening here is we're inviting movement into the spine, into our organs, our belly, our shoulders, and allowing any emotions trapped there to be released as well. Now bring your big toes together so they touch if you can. So kind of the shape of a triangle. Reach back with your hips for child's pose. If your head doesn't reach your mat, it's okay. You can even place your hands under, palm over palm, stacking them under your head. You can extend your arms away from you. But this is a posture of bowing down and accepting where we are. It's a posture of humility. We are humbled and we surrender here. And we rest. This also opens the hips. One more full breath in and out here. And then come back up onto all fours. You can press into the palms of your hands. Bring your hands to your heart. And invite peace and forgiveness and love and grace to yourself and to all others. Bring your hands to your third eye. Lift your chin and invite the light. Bring your hands to your hearts and bow in gratitude. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Yeah, I when I was doing this, I kept thinking about all the people that told me that they couldn't meditate or couldn't do yoga because it's not for them. And I think about me used to being that person because I couldn't slow down my brain. But if that's you saying that, you should be doubling down on figuring ways to slow down your brain. Because when our brains are quick, the cortisol, all the other stuff kind of rolls with us, right? It kind of brings that, so that this time of peace is super important. So I appreciate you.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah, let's get back in the studio and finish this up.
All right.
All right, Mary. So I feel a little bit better. I think I needed more than that 5 minutes, but that's for another day. But I appreciate you bringing that practice to our audience. And my hope is that people could find that they could start working on home first and giving themselves forgiveness and love and grace and to start the healing process. And as we've talked about throughout this whole process movement helps. So that video that you have there, we'll probably post on its own too. But thank you so much for being here today. And I really, truly am grateful for this conversation. I feel like it's truly, whether you knew it or not, it is years in the making, but it is God's timing, my friend. So, but if somebody wants to connect with you and with Soul Purpose Yoga, how can they do that?
They can just go to soulpurposeyoga.com.
Boom.
And you can email me, you can call me. My phone is on there. I'm open. Learn a little bit more about me. And then also, I just wanted to say this, that it just came to be, so nothing's been posted yet, but I believe it's Sunday, December 15th from 12 to 3. I'll be doing a grief yoga experience, meditation, yoga, and helping people move through the grief process. That'll be at Neon Soul Yoga at the South Barrington Arboretum, where I teach 4 days a week.
Beautiful. Awesome.
So find me there, find me here, find me everywhere.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
That's a couple days after we'll be launching this one, but yeah,
that's
perfect.
Like,
Come visit for sure. So that's perfect timing.
There's going to be more. After the first of the year, there's going to be a lot more grief workshops and stuff that I'm doing.
Beautiful. Well, you're doing beautiful work. And I really have a respect for people that take their struggles and kind of go in and try to focus in on how they could give back to people that have experienced those struggles. And it sounds like God's given you a job to work on one of his hardest emotions for us humans, and that's grief. But we're grateful for you, grateful for the yoga session that we just have. And my hope is that people will reach out and to be able to get support, whether it's you or I love you. Obviously, you're great, but if it's somebody else too, it's about healing, and it's about becoming our best authentic self. Yep. So thanks for sharing your experience. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I hope, I guess, as we're probably going to do another show as we continue to evolve in life. My friends, grief sucks. And the human experience sometimes is, it's heavy. So getting a small circle of people that you love, trust, I think that's something that's huge, that know you for your authentic self, where you don't have to put up this facade and you could work through what you're working through with good people around you. I think that's a must. And if you don't have that, maybe Soul Purpose Yoga in that community is a part of it. Or maybe there's somebody else that you're thinking about too. My friends, grief is hard. Life is hard, but we are stronger together. But the revolution does start at home. So allowing ourselves forgiveness, allowing ourselves the love and grace here first, as we work through this experience we call life, is so crucial, because without making sure we're home or good here at home first, we cannot share that forgiveness and love for others. And my friends, the world needs it more now than ever. So support local, love local, and we're stronger together, friends. Peace out. Thanks for watching.